Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media Webinars. Welcome to today's webinar on mine water, where a panel of experts will showcase the technologies to address mine water challenges. Today's webinar is sponsored by Interwaste, a proud Sachet Environment company, and IPR. We thank them for making this event possible. Before we begin, please be aware that we have enabled the Q&A function, so please post any questions into the Q&A. You'll find this on the panel at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists may not be able to answer all of your questions during today's hour-long webinar, but we will read through all of them. We have also enabled the chat facility, so you can post your comments in the chat. You'll also find this at the bottom of your screen. Please do not, however, post any questions in the chat as we may miss them. Post your questions into the Q&A instead. Please be aware we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending the recording to you when it's available. We're also streaming the webinar live on YouTube and we'll share the link in the chat once it's available. Today's webinar will be facilitated by Marius Keert, the Director of MK Water and Mine Water Consultancy. Marius has over 4 decades of experience working in the Department of Water Affairs. He also has substantial know-how in the scientific, technical, and managerial aspects of water quality management. Marius will facilitate the discussion with our esteemed panel, which includes Kate Stubbs, the Group Marketing and Business Development Director of Interwaste, Jennifer Broadhurst, Associate Professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering at the University of Cape Town, Peter Shepherd, Principal Hydrologist at SRK Consulting, and Joshua Ellis, the Acting Head of Sustainability at Harmony Gold Mining Company. I'll hand over now to our facilitator, Marius Keert, to continue with the proceedings. Over to you, Marius.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for the introduction. From my side, I would also like to welcome all our panelist members, but also equally heartily welcome to all our guests. And I'd also like to thank Creamer Media for this excellent initiative to bring the experts on board for, I hope, fruitful discussions, and of course for Interwaste who made this possible. Now, during my long career in the Department of Water Affairs, I've been involved with, amongst others, water quality management, but in 2010, the focus suddenly changed to the management of mine water, or to be more specific, the looming potential of acid mine drainage decant from the Witwatersrand basins. Now, this was a very interesting period in time for actually the whole mining industry in South Africa in terms of water management. So most of the gold mining companies in the Witwatersrand were left with all the basins being dewatered. Now, I know this was not the case in all the mining areas, but most of the mining areas struggled with this challenge. So most of the mining in Witwatersrand, the mining basins were dewatered. So some other stage, this water, when the mine stopped mining, this water or this basins started to rewater. But this whole event in the Witwatersrand also triggered all mining companies to come to the party and to do some introspection on the status of their specific and unique water management. So at the time, also once mining stops and basins start to refill. So it's not only in the Witwatersrand, it's all over. I know South Africa, from the Department of Water Affairs on a national basis, we did some catchment studies with specific interest in what's happening with the mining companies and what's the status of them, and what are the treatment systems in place, etc. So in the case of the Witwatersrand, these basins that started filling up raised a lot of questions. Now, some of the questions are, how do you deal with this rising water table? Should you pump it? Should you leave it like that? And I know in the department and with many academic institutions, we had a lot of challenges because there was a lot of differences. So do you pump it? Do you leave it like that? The other thing is, who's responsible for pumping of this acid mine drainage water? What technology will be the best for the treatment of the acid mine drainage? And we know that the water quality differs in the mining areas from basin to basin, from catchment to catchment. So it is not a one fit for all. Will benefit from this treated or semi-treated acid mine drainage, because somebody has to pay for it. But what will be the benefits for the bigger environment as well as for maybe for the communities? and then also who will operate and maintain the treatment plants. Because you build a treatment plant, and whilst the mines are running up and running, they can afford to pay the treatment cost and the pumping cost. But if the mines stop mining, then you're sitting with this big problem. So it's not a one-day thing. It is something that you have to look forward for a long time. So because of the mining of this potential environmental disaster, most mining companies countrywide revisited their mine water plans. And I know the department at the time was involved in this. But of course, you don't get answers like everywhere. So we had to go abroad to look for answers there, look at different technologies. And I must say there were many people coming up, and some of them fly by night, sorry to say it. But of course, you had very good companies also with good techniques in terms of treatment. So now, in the year 2024, if we look at the bigger picture now, 60% of the country's rivers are overexploited. And South Africa is steering towards a 17% water deficit in 2030. We know what's happening now in the Witwatersrand. We know what's happening in the Vaal River. And I mean, of course, if the quality deteriorates, then the availability of the water also deteriorates and is reduced, because you have to treat the water and it's more costly, etc. So it is not something that you can solve overnight, but I think this team, I hope, will give us some answers. So the discussions today, I think, are very, very relevant. And as I said, I think it's a very good initiative by Creamer Media to bring the experts together to deal with the mine water management challenges that we have in South Africa. But I've said enough. Let me introduce you now to the first speaker. That will be Kate Stubbs. I think Shannon already said something about her, but she is the Group Marketing Director for Interwaste Group, a leading global environment solutions firm. She has 20 years of executive experience in marketing, sales, strategy, and communications across various sectors. Kate holds a BCom in business management and has completed leadership and executive development programs at Gibbs Business School. Kate, we're looking forward to your talk, and over to you now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Marius. It's great to be here. I think from an Interwaste and a Group Sachet perspective, we're obviously a waste management business, very focused on finding environmental solutions to prevent the degradation of our beautiful environmental systems and our ecosystems. So water is critical. Being a South African, we are a water scarce nation already before our water crisis starts. And so anything that we can do and assist our clients in repurposing and reusing their waste and their water is critical to us. From a mining perspective, we predominantly focus on offering integrated solutions to all mines. So that involves assessing their waste streams and aligning the solutions to legislation and whatever their strategies are. Many of the mines are on a zero waste to landfill journey now. And so it's designing solutions to repurpose their waste. Mine water specifically is a complex topic. And as you said, Marius, no, mine water is the same, really. It varies according to where it's produced, how it's produced, what format it's in. And we treat a lot of liquid waste, and it's the same thing. There's no silver bullet solution to that. So from maybe just shortly from a mine water perspective, we've mainly been involved probably on the smaller scale processing types of typically hydrocarbon contaminated water. Most mines have that because they generally operate yellow plant or machinery or equipment which has to be washed through wash bays at some point, and that liquid needs to be treated effectively. Yeah, I think that's a short introduction for now, and I look forward to engaging a bit further as we go.
Thank you, Kate. I think let's move on. If there are no urgent questions, let's move on then to Jennifer. She's from the University of Cape Town. She has 30 years research and development experience in the field of mineral beneficiation within various industry and academic organizations. Since joining the Department of Chemical Engineering at UCT in July 2001, She has been involved in several research projects on environmental sustainability, including in coal-based power generation and primary metal production industry sectors. Jennifer, I hope you can give us some light on some of the questions that we've asked already, or the questions that you know will come. So over to you, Jennifer.
Okay, so thank you very much, Marius. It's a pleasure to be here. As indicated, I worked in the mining industry and got very involved with all the water issues, and then had the privilege of being able to, my second half of my career, being able to go to university and research some of these issues. So that's where what I'm doing at the moment. So I think I give some lectures on mine water and that, and I think, in terms of water consumption, the industry, water is an essential part of the minerals extraction and beneficiation sector or operations. It's used extensively in cooling, in processing and extractions. We think hydrometallurgical extraction in particular, and also in the dust suppression and transport of materials. And those materials are not just your targeted ores, it's also all your waste, your tailings. And I think that many people don't know this, but really the tailings deposit is the biggest water sink on mining operations. So if we tend to throw around a ballpark figure of in terms of water consumption of 1 cubic meter per ton, and 70% of that water utilization occurs at the tailings dam through seepage and entrainment and evaporation. So if we're looking really at a national or global scale, I think that, even in mining intensive areas, mining is not a big player, typically around about 3 to 6% of water consumption nationally, is the figure that is generally published. Agriculture obviously being the major culprit there, but it can have really significant impacts on a local or catchment level. And it's not only particularly because mining occurs in mining scarce areas. And this is not only through water consumption, but also it can play havoc with local water tables. Most of our mines, even in dry areas, we tend to go beneath the water table. And so all this pumping and treating and recirculating water can have effects for kilometers on local groundwater tables, etc. In terms of quality, we get water pollution through events such as catastrophic events, such as collapse of tailings. We also get water pollution through, and the most commonly through runoff and seepage. And I think Marius mentioned acid mine drainage is really one of the most significant challenges in terms of water quality. We have this problem with our gold fields and in the Witwatersrand, and also in our coal fields, which contain pyrite. And that's from underground, where pyrite is exposed on the surfaces of your workings and in your mine dumps. When we talk about water pollution on surrounding environments, and also it extends to communities as well, particularly South Africa and Africa, the impacts of water consumption and pollution can be really significant because of communities living so close to the operations. So yes, it can have a direct effect on health, more indirect effects on their livelihoods when water is polluted, particularly involved in agricultural activities, and even their health, their safety, because we get a lot of sinkholes. We still have children drowning in tailings dams. The sinkholes have often formed with the acid mine drainage, dissolving the dolomitic ores and creating these big sinkholes. Lots of accidents have occurred there. And of course, conflict. I think it was Mark Twain who said that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And that really applies in the case of mining, with water-related issues, either consumption or pollution, accounting for the majority of community mine conflicts. So that's also really important. There's lots, the mining industry has advanced a lot, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. I'd like to also talk about some of the good news stories. That's the bad news. The good news being, what is the mining industry doing? And then looking forward, what can they do still further? But I think I'm going to hand back to Marius and talk a little bit later about those things. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just a question in terms of, you said we're going to talk about it later, but I think in terms of technology and the right technologies, do you think as an academic institution, enough investigations and research and development is being done? Look, I mean, research, yes, and I mean, that's what, I remember in the old days, we always accused academics, and nothing against you, but I mean, we don't want you just to do research and research. It must be developed as well. So, I mean, my question is also, have you got something that you've researched and there's a good outcome, but is it implemented? Can you say a few words on that, please?
Good question. It's been my bane, I think, coming from industry and then going into academia. Some of my research actually, and it's particularly around tailings, is actually looking at why don't university developed solutions get implemented? So what is the barriers to transfer? And that's a whole nother conversation, but this is really quite important for us to actually get that innovation. It's not easy with the mining industry, I have to admit. So I think, first of all, to be fair to the mining sector, they've come a long, long way. Even since the days that I started working in the mining industry in the 80s, and now their whole attitude has changed and their approaches have changed towards water. So we see these days most mining operations are really, particularly your major ones, juniors, another topic of conversation, working with them as well at the moment, but certainly your majors are committed to minimizing their water consumption and their impacts on water. And that is through better housekeeping even, but I think more majorly through recycling. So you'll see that most of the mining houses these days are committed to sort of closed water circuits, and also even using alternative water sources. So some examples, for instance, in Mogalakwena, where the Anglo has got a partnership with the municipality where they use treated sewage effluent in their processing plant instead of fresh groundwater. So there are good examples, and I think South Africa in particular has been quite innovative. I think not just in what they do, but also in partnering with external organizations, with private industry, with government, in kind of trying to solve regional water issues. Another example, of course, is eMalahleni, where the water reclamation plant, where BHP and Anglo back in 2007 got together and built this acid mine drainage treatment plant, which now generates, it's the only plant in the world which generates drinking quality water from acid mine drainage, and then sells it to the local municipality. So I think that there's been a lot of progress in that respect. Are they actually being proactive enough? Then I'm going to say no. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for the industry to be more proactive in preventing water contamination and consumption of water. And particularly, we're looking at, as I've mentioned, the tailings is the biggest water sink. And there really is a lot of opportunity to reduce the water associated with both mine dust suppression and with these tailings. So dry stacking. This is becoming more and more popular, generally speaking, where you dewater your tailings and dry stack them so you don't get this so much seepage, and also you don't get so much water loss through evaporation. We've seen this in the coal industry, interesting enough. You don't think of the coal industry being proactive, but this was really due to their problems with water and water licenses. Their tailing, their thickener underflow, most operations now put it through, the collieries put them through filter presses, and whereas previously that was really these, they didn't dewater their tailings; it was dumped in tailings dams. It's now dewatered and compressed together with coarser waste, which really is more environmentally friendly. Also stops spontaneous combustion. Moving further up the sort of the material chain, we've got dry processing. So here you're looking at fluidized beds particularly for separation. You're looking at dry jigging, fluidized beds, dry magnetic separation, getting a little bit more innovative. We've seen this in the iron ore industry in China and Australia and even India, not in South Africa. We don't have any dry processing. And then even further up the material chain, because really the further you move up, the greater your opportunities to actually remove risk. And so if you go further upstream, and another one is zero waste. So, or in this case, zero tailings. Really, if we can remove tailings, then or stop building tailings storage facilities, then we are removing a lot of water-related risks, from geotechnical failure to pollution to just water consumption. We've done a lot of work on the university. We are working a bit with industry to try and get this moving. We're actually working in Colombia. Funny enough, there's commercial applications that we are busy working on with industry, but we're having a lot of problems getting the local industry to be a bit more proactive in that regard. So yes, it's a case of trying to work with how we partner with industries in development as universities. And I think that one of our big challenges there was that most of our big mining houses used to have their own R&D units back in the good old days, and the universities, and I was very instrumental in some of those. So the universities really did some of the fundamental research, and sort of to support the more applied research by places like Mintech and science houses and the research development institutes within the industry, and those have really gone. We've still got Mintech, but they tended to be competing with universities who in very many ways are not equipped to actually do implementation and tech transfer. So this is where we really need to have productive partnerships, and it's something that I've actually really focused on quite a bit with my research.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. I think that was a good answer. I just want to go back to Kate because I mean, you're not off the hook. Kate, your company's role in the treatment of mine water. Can you give us a short answer on that one? Are you already involved in that, and where and to what extent?
Yeah, I can give you a short answer because as I said, I mean, there's large-scale mine water. We don't do it all. We've just recently launched our first of its kind effluent treatment plant, leachate treatment plant, which treats sort of high hazardous liquid waste, and we recover it to 80-90% to that to clean water. But you know, it's probably on a smaller scale to these large volumes of tailings dams or mine water waste, but that we can offer. That's situated in Dalmaston, really exciting for us. And then, you know, the hydrocarbon contaminated water, that's fairly simple. We treat. It's really about looking for the right solutions to see where we can assist. Obviously, I think another part of waste, if you consider waste from these wastewater treatment works or effluent treatment plants, there's always byproducts from them. And so we do already service quite a few of those on-site and off-site effluent treatment plants with the byproducts coming. So some of the solids that come out of that whole process need to be safely treated and disposed of. So we manage that type of waste too.
Okay, thank you. I see there's a couple of interesting questions, and I mean, Kutela Manyeni, I see your question. I'll come back to that now, but there's interesting one, AMD versus mine impacted water. Can somebody just explain? I mean, I've got my own opinion on that, but I think that'll be a good question for Josh to answer. So I'm going to leave that question, Andrew Barker, you asked the question. I'm going to leave it for Joshua to answer. He's the last speaker. But let me just introduce you now to Peter Shepherd. He's our next speaker. Peter is a principal hydrologist at SRK Consulting. He has over 28 years of experience in hydrology. Peter's specialization including floodlines, dam hydrology, mine water management. Okay, so he's there, so he can answer questions on that. Then river hydrology, water supply, and flood management. If you can answer this question in terms of mine water versus impacted or AMD, you can do so. Otherwise, we leave it for yours. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, I think I'd like to leave that for Josh there, because today what I'd really like to is just give a bit of feedback on some of the various issues with regards to mine water that I've managed to be able to see. Because one of the good things about being a consultant is that you have a vast experience all over the world in terms of some of the mine water problems that you get. So, I think I've been lucky enough to work from South Africa all the way up through the DRC to West Africa, and then also in places like Siberia, as well as Yemen, and some of the very dry places. So, as you know, all those places have got very different kind of problems there. In Yemen, it's all to do with supply, and any kind of contamination, because it's such a scarce, you think it's very scarce here, but in Yemen it's extremely scarce water. So it's not tolerated. And some of the things you see that are very different and from a water perspective there, everything is in these wadis, they're little like valleys. And in those valleys there, that's the only water supply source for the communities. So and water seems to really rule where development can occur in some of those places. But what I found very interesting is that it doesn't matter if you're an enemy or if you a rival person to the village itself. There, water is shared. It doesn't matter where you go. People will always offer you water to ensure that. So they take it very, very seriously from a supply perspective in places like Yemen. And then you get to different places like Siberia, where half the year you can't use water because it's all frozen. So they have different kind of water-related issues. We don't obviously see that here, but theirs is all about trying to almost minimize the amount of water, because as soon as it freezes on all these dams, then they close the mine for a certain period of time until they reopen there. But getting closer to our home, to Africa, what I've seen is in the more that there's really down to three things there. All the water issues are either too much, too little, or too dirty. So too much is always to do with flooding and infrastructure that's potentially going to be impacted with flooding. Too little is really down to water supply, where you're going to get the water from, how you're going to minimize the amount of water use. And too dirty is I think what is key and come out earlier today is, how to manage the water that is too too dirty to either reuse, etc. So I think if we can just always think about the problems in terms of too much, too little, and too dirty, anywhere in the world, you will be able to find some of the issues that relate to that thing. But what I've also noticed is that, and now I'm getting closer to South Africa, is that one of the key things that I've seen over this last 20, 30 years, was brought a little bit earlier, is there's been a definite shift in the attitude towards how we're going to deal with water, and how we're going to focus, how all the various mining houses are trying to focus to protect the environment. You know, mining may only be there for 100 years, 50 years, but the tailings dams and everything else is going to be there for thousands of years. So we've got to manage and look after that facility in such a way that we've got to look at a very long-term way of trying to manage the water. So you also have to continue to mine sustainably, and Marius brought it up there earlier. Some of that basin, the water coming from the basin, is going to be very expensive to treat, and it's going to be an ongoing problem for a very long time, even with the treatment. So some of the key things that I've noticed inside in the mining houses, that in terms of the attitude, is that there is always a key focus to try and minimize the areas that are impacted on. So, you know, if you've got a big plant area and it rains, then you have a lot of water with which you've got to deal with. Whereas if you've got a very small area or a very isolated area, and you maybe have an extremely dirty area, that is, if you can minimize that area, then any kind of water that comes from there is far less than what you would do if you diluted it in, with a much bigger dirty water area there. So I've seen a key focus to try and minimize the dirty areas within mining. Secondly, I think there's a key aspect to try and utilize the various qualities of the water in different processes within the various mining processes. So, for instance, just to give you an example, something like gland service. Gland service water really requires water that doesn't have any of the sediment within it there. So the quality of the water is, in a gland service it could be something like sewage water that is relatively clean, but it might not be able to be drunk, for instance, there. So you can utilize the water there instead of utilizing raw water. So the less raw water or new water that you bring into the system, the less water you have to deal with. And then if you look at the lining of pollution control dams, dumps, and waste dumps to try and minimize the amount of water that can pollute the ground and surface water resources, there has been more facilities lined in the last 12 years than there were in the previous 100-odd years of mining in this country, and that will definitely reduce the amount of pollution into our water resources. But they will bring additional issues into water management that would need to be dealt with, because if you are reusing the water more and more often, there's going to be a time that water quality will reduce to such an extent that you can't use it. So you would need to develop some kind of technologies to try and see how you can dispose of or clean that water even further. So I think for now, anyway, Marius, I think there has been a lot of work that's been done, specifically with the attitude within the mining houses. But still, we will always have to deal with too much, too little, and too dirty waters on the mining area.
Thank you, Peter. I think that was good information. Yeah, I agree with the mining companies that I think they are on board, most of what I know of. And at the time when we had challenges with mining houses or with mining companies and basins that are filling up and mine water that's flowing out everywhere, I think most of the mining companies did their homework, so it's always best to do good housekeeping, and that's what we experience if you visit the mine. And for that matter, actually any treatment plant or whatever, wastewater treatment plant, doesn't matter. It's good housekeeping. If you can do good housekeeping, then you solve most of the problems. But I mean, if your neighbor complains about your water, then you're already in trouble. And I know one of the challenges of the mining companies, because they're right next to each other, and when you start rewater or dewatering the compartments, then you have an impact on the downstream compartment. So it is a very difficult thing to handle. But I mean, I think the mining houses or the mining companies are actually, according to me, doing very well, given that they've got certain challenges. I've got interesting questions. I'm going to do some of them. There are so many questions. Some of them it's going to be difficult to answer, but I mean, I'll read this one, which I think is relevant. There was this one. Let me just check. Oh yeah, we have an old nickel copper underground shaft in Botswana that yields lots of water daily. If not pumped, the town experiences tremors. Is there a way of treating this large amount of water pumped from these companies? Now, I can tell you when the water started to refill in the Witwatersrand basins, we were involved with the Council for Geoscience, and there were a lot of tremors, and we were very concerned because some of the geologists told us that when the water starts filling up, you might have this type of reaction. So I don't know, Peter, can you talk us through that? I know you are a principal hydrologist, so you're supposed to give me some answers on it. It's not your field, but I mean, if you can help us out on this one. What is your opinion on this?
So I think it says we have an old nickel mine underground in Botswana that yields lots of flow. If not pumped, the water expenses tremors. Is there a way of treating this large amount of water pumped from these old troughs for households or farm use? I mean, I think absolutely there is a way that that water can be used. Treatment of water of mine water can be expensive, and I think one of the key things that really is always a hindering factor with regards to treatment is always what to do with the brine. So once you've cleaned it, all you've done is you've taken the contaminants and you made it into a smaller amount there, but it's still the same amount of pollutants. So you need to try and deal with the waste side there. So yes, it can be treated, but you have to deal with the brine as well as the capex and opex expenses that come with it.
Okay, thank you. There's just one other one which I would like to read from Trishka Ramarak. Hello, panel members. Thank you for your time. I would like to know how you will be able to recognize a fly-by-night. Now, I mentioned the word fly-by-night when in the process of erecting a water treatment plant to treat AMD. Is there any verification for these companies? I'll try and answer it myself. Another whether any one of you would like to come in here, but we experienced it at the time, and it's probably still the case. You've got somebody, and I do it kitchen chemistry. That's what I call it. They've got in the backyard or in the kitchen, they've got the little sampling systems and treatment systems, and then they get this wonderful solutions of the problems, but it's not been proven on site. So this is where, Jennifer, I think you can also assist. I mean, this is the problem that we have with mine water. There are so many technologies available. Some of the technologies are very good, but unfortunately not proven yet. So how can you go on a big scale? Because you've got a, as I say, kitchen chemistry in your kitchen. You've got some chemistry going on there, and sometimes it works. But I mean, to take that to a larger scale, I mean, they're probably treating 10 liters a day or maybe 100 liters a day. But you have to take it to 1 megaliter a day or 5 or 10 or 20 megaliters per day. That switch, and I mean, this is what we call the fly-by-night. If it's not proven on a system, on a mine or wherever on AMD, then how can you implement it? How can you spend a lot of money, on force a mine to do that? So I don't know whether any one of the panel members you want to raise your hand, you're more than welcome. But I mean, that is the difficulty that we're sitting with.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. The problem is that there are so many processes that have been put out there for recovery. I mean, quite advanced processes for recovery of all kinds of components from acid mine drainage, some pretty sophisticated methods. But how do you know what's going to be viable from a techno-economic and environmental perspective? And I think this is why it's so important to follow like an innovation sort of chain, where you actually technology innovation sort of process, where you follow this, you look at preliminary feasibility, then you go to your building your business case, so look at economies of scale. Some of these, depending on where you're implementing, it's just not ever going to fly. There's no markets for the products, etc., etc. Transport of materials is what we found. Our studies is huge. So if you're going to the costs of transporting in South Africa, because mostly by road. So, you've got to take all of that into account. And then, of course, the whole thing is to actually, and this is what we find one of the biggest barriers to actually implementation, you've got to demonstrate at scale that these processes work. So I think that this has become very, very obvious to us, is that you can prove, you can do conceptual studies in a lab, you can even do paper studies, but to say, okay, this looks reasonable, economic sensitivity studies, understand under what conditions it will work and it won't work from a techno-economic perspective, but you've got to be able to build pilot plants. And I think that's where to actually demonstrate on working with Mintech on this biodesulfurization plant for acid mine drainage. And one of my PhDs is actually looking at why there's such a huge difference in performance between, small columns, or, almost mini columns that we have in the pilot plant at Mintech versus this large demo scale, and it's operating very differently. So we have to, and that requires industry to get involved. You could say a government, but I don't know if our government will. But that you got to be able to show proof of concept on a larger scale. So I think these are important steps to go and make sure that this kind of homework is actually done on these processes before you get to commercial implementation, or before there's acceptance of these processes by industry.
Thank you, Jennifer.
If I can maybe just add to that, from recently, our experience of recently designing our own effluent treatment plant. Absolutely, we see there's no one size fits all. So every mine water, liquid waste needs to be tested. We're part of a group with vast international expertise in treating different types of liquid waste. And they first spec'd the solution that they believed is tried and tested and would work for us in South Africa. So we had a blueprint, an international blueprint. We brought it out here and locally worked with our experts and actually fundamentally changed the way the process worked. It had to be aligned to our operating conditions, our types of waste. So a lot was, even though there was, almost a foolproof international expertise of treating that type of waste, in our context and where we're treating it was fundamentally different. And that involved collaboration with international experts, our local ones, as well as collaboration with technical specialists and partners in the market. So for me, fly by night, these things you can be sold a really fancy Rolls-Royce machine, but it won't work. You need to you do need to spend a little bit of time running trials and testing it. And then the other part, maybe from a private business perspective, is a commercial reality. What do you keep competing against? You need to make sure there's compliance in the market. Otherwise, those state-of-the-art solutions which are compliant, aren't sustainable if other people are not being held to the same standards. So that's another challenge we'll have.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've answered the question that was asked. I mean, can you give us, Kate, any specific, or you've got a plant running, and what are the successes of that? But I think you've dealt with that. one of the questions that was raised. Okay, let's move on to Joshua now. Now, Joshua, there's a specific reason why you're the last speaker, because you are actively involved in the mining company. So, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. And I'll put my regulator's hat on for a while. So now that you can't get close to me and hit me or something, I can also ask difficult questions, because you made a lot of promises at the time. But yeah, just as the tongue in the cheek. Yours is from Harmony Gold Mine. He's there for how long? I don't know, George, maybe a couple of decades already. I don't know. He's currently the acting head of sustainability of Harmony Gold Mining Company. He's an experienced senior environmental and sustainability manager with a demonstrated history of working in the mining and metals industry. And I know, Josh, you were very much involved at the time when we had lots of discussions, and I must say Josh was one of the people that you can really phone every time. He'll give you answers. If he doesn't have an answer, he'll come back to you. So Josh, we had differences, but at the time we agreed to disagree. But Josh, I would like to hear from you, please.
So Marius, thank you very much. And I think the setup by Jaden and Jennifer, Kate, and Peter has actually put things in context. So thank you first of all very much for inviting us to the seminar. And it's really a privilege. I think when we started the conversation initially, it's 28 years now, Marius, that I've been in the mining industry. So maybe without going into too much detail. Been part of the journey, certainly been part of the water journey. But let me talk about Harmony Gold. Where we are today versus maybe where we were a decade or two ago. Our journey, started really back in 2010. We operate basically in all three of the main jurisdictions in the gold fields. In the Free State, in the Northwest, and in the Gauteng regions. We're sitting towards the bottom end of the Far West Rand, with Mponeng, the deepest gold mine in the world. We're still operating that mine. Working for a company that's 73 years old in South Africa actually makes me very proud to say, the work that we've done in the last 2 decades is actually unbelievable. Just the basic understanding, technical understandings in terms of mine flooding, being able to plan much more appropriately than what we've done before. We've, over the last 15 years, invested significant amounts of capital towards dealing with some of the challenges we have around water. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. I think, Marius, also the understanding in terms of what important role water plays in mining is something that is now firmly entrenched within mining companies' strategic plans. We've just made significant capital investments in terms of deepening operations, extending life of mine, of some of our operations in Mponeng in particular, Moab Kutsong operations in the Northwest. So we most definitely have to have a long-term view when it comes to water management. What Peter mentioned, in certain cases we've got too much. We deal with excess water around the Covalent area, and Margaret Water Company down in the Bar River area. In certain cases we're struggling. For example, in the Free State, Marius, you'll know full well some of the challenges that we have in terms of sustainable water supply, not just us, but also in our communities around us in the Free State. So what have we done? First of all, we've done what we're supposed to do. We've significantly increased our recycling ratios. Jennifer, I'd love to share, our recovery from our tailings facility versus what you mentioned earlier. We're most definitely not losing 70% of our water, especially some of our newer facilities. We've started very aggressively retreating our tailings facilities. There's 2 benefits in that. We've created our own little circular economy in terms of mining waste, giving us an opportunity to extend our life of mine. We must not forget, we also as with the rest of the mining industry, still play a significant part in ensuring some economic sustainability and contributions to the GDPs. So it is essential for us to extend our basic contribution to the country and to society. But we have to have security. If you have 25-year future plans ahead of you, you cannot be irresponsible when it comes to mine water. We have paid the price. As you've rightly said, Marius, conversations 10, 15 years ago around how to deal with mine water versus what's happening today. Today, you hardly see a newspaper article around AMD or mine flooding because mines have really taken responsibility, and Harmony has certainly taken responsibility for taking charge of those dewatering activities, making sure that we've optimized. We ourselves have constructed several water treatment plants where, first of all, we offset our own consumption. We're treating water in certain cases to potable standards to make sure that we've got potable water. We continue with engagements around collaboration with the likes of Rand Water. I'd like the reference to Mintech. In many spaces, from the Mineral Council right through to our own neighbors, we are much more mature as an organization and as an industry than what we were maybe 10, 20 years ago. So Marius, that really is the journey. And I'd like to challenge, maybe put a challenge out there. And I think you and I many years ago had this conversation as well. I think for the mines that are in operation, and we're talking about R&D and new technology in terms of water treatment, this is like changing the tire while you're driving the car. We currently mining. The technology is available to us that is commercially available. We are applying. And my tip in terms of the fly-by-nights is you need to partner. You need to partner in terms of making sure that you've got credible service providers, that you do decent due diligence. And I'll somewhat deal with that, that question around AMD or mine impacted water. Yes, there's always the conversation around, there's sometimes a blanket thrown out, this whole concept of AMD. I personally am not a big favorite of that because every catchment, every mine has a very unique suite of waters that you need to understand. You need to understand what you're dealing with in finding solutions. There's no blanket approach here. So you need to understand your water balances. You need to understand your salt balances, the loads, even forward-looking, anticipating what's going to happen as certain voids fill and how your water qualities are going to change. Because once you've constructed a multi-million rand water treatment facility, you need to be pretty sure that you'll still have the ability to continue to be able to treat water. We've also invested quite a bit in terms of the other side of the spectrum, in terms of what we could potentially use this water for. I'm not gonna mention how much money we've paid in the last 10, 15 years in terms of just pumping of water. If you're starting lifting water from 3,000 meters underground to enable you to continue with mining, it comes at a significant cost. So there's a direct cost associated. Never mind all of the indirect costs in terms of containment and dealing with the water once you've brought it to surface. But I think it is really important to also look at this whole issue of enabling environment. We're having a conversation around large volumes of excess water, not just for us as Harmony Gold, but some of our neighboring mining companies in the same catchments. I'm not going to quote this figure exactly. Somebody on the call might know a better figure, but we were talking around 300 megaliters of water per day as potential excess water in the West Rand or the Far West Rand if you combine all of those sources. Now, if I listen to the very same conversation from Rand Water, indicating deficits of 600-700 megaliters, in the next couple of years, sometimes I'm still baffled that we as a country have not necessarily created such an enabling environment that we're able to deal with this and have not converted what is, most of us term as a liability, but which is actually a very great opportunity. We're very aware of some of the good work that the guys have done, especially in the coal fields. Maybe the suite of water that they have to deal with is slightly different. Maybe the appetite in terms of being able to transfer this water. I mean, water is still relatively cheap in certain jurisdictions, and it makes the simple economics of taking very expensive water, adding further cost to that and converting that into potable water, for example. So we're also investing through innovation. Somebody mentioned earlier in terms of innovation, through an innovation and collaboration in downstream use of that water. I mean, we've got food, agriculture, biomass. I mean, there is vast applications for treated mine water, and the degree of treatment depends on what you're going to ultimately use this water for. So I think there's still a lot of room for improvement around the thinking around this. I think creating the enabling environment, Marius, seeing that you volunteered to put your regulator hat on, I'm gonna punt this one to you. I think we can do a lot more in terms of being more agile, being able to make good decisions quicker around how we convert this potential resource into something that actually means something for the country. In a country where it's potentially difficult and administratively cumbersome, to acquire authorizations and to also change course, as we've in the last couple of decades have been able to convert our capacity to understand and treat water. We've not quite been as agile in terms of maybe modifying our regulatory framework. We've often spoken about this one system in the country as far as environmental authorizations are concerned. And I think assisting in terms of that. There's the issue of institutional control. Whatever solutions we bring to the table, especially even now during operations and post-closure. Somebody mentioned earlier about tailings facilities that are going to be around for 1,000 years versus a life of mine of maybe 25 or 30 years for some of the longer-term investors. Is that we also critically look at that, because that will enable us to do many of the things that I think we've solved. I don't think that we are, and maybe this is a South African culture thing, and maybe it's a mining industry thing. I don't think we're scared of the technical challenges associated with actually treating water. We will find a way. We've got, if I can refer to the speakers on the call, we have people doing a lot of work and a lot of research, and we've seen over the past decade how a lot of that research is actually materializing into the commercial solutions. I mean, today we can have partnerships with companies with quite innovative ways of dealing and treating with water. So I think that part will nearly take care of itself. And I hear the plea for investment in research and development, but also then the appreciation that again, we are an operating mine. We have future plans. You don't just willy-nilly decide in terms of changing ship as far as dealing with water is concerned. And Marius, maybe a last point in terms of work that's been done. I think what has become critically important for us is as water and sanitation infrastructure around our operations, we've seen that fail, over many decades. We see the communities in which we live as most of us live as mining companies and the communities directly adjacent to our operations. We feel the brunt of that. I mean, if we are concerned about water security in terms of being able to mine, equally so the communities in which we live. So we've invested quite a bit in the last couple of years in terms of collaborating with municipalities, collaborating with water supply companies, playing our role within those areas. In actual fact, we've taken over some and building capacity, some of the wastewater treatment facilities in all three of the jurisdictions in South Africa where we operate. We've assisted municipalities in terms of pumping of water, especially down the Free State in the Carletonville area and also in the Stilfontein-Kuma area. And it's not just a question of it being a token investment. This is really about rebuilding capacity, aligning, giving engineering advice, and capacitating our local municipalities as well to be able to deal with that. And in that spectrum, we are finding, as we engage and as we collaborate, we're finding even more touch points. Somebody was mentioning earlier the possible use of conventional wastewater for, converting that to potable water or converting that to some other agricultural uses. We are actively doing that, and we are actively having those conversations. In jurisdictions where we don't have enough water, we are actively talking to municipalities, actively talking to to other stakeholders to say, maybe we can accommodate some of your wastewater and vice versa. So I think the maturity, Marius, in terms of the relationships over the last decade or two is the landscape has completely changed. In actual fact, in the past, where everybody was running in a direction with something, I think there's real collaboration. I still think there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of redefining this resource that we have. Not just for us as a mining companies, but also for the communities and the industries around us. And this whole push towards recycling and I'm actually dead serious in terms of the bit of circular economy around mine waste and mine tailings really gives us an opportunity to rethink our deposition strategies. Consolidation of some of the waste on some of the dolomitic areas, some of the 70, 50, 60-year-old tailings facilities, to reclaim those and more responsibly deposit them, increasing recycling capacities. We're going to be faced with that challenge going forward regardless. And I think we have an opportunity with our technology partners to find different ways of doing this. So sorry, Marius, that's a mouthful, but you asked us to catch up there.
Yeah, Joshua, no, thanks very much. I mean, with all your experience, you definitely touched on on a couple of sensitive nerves. I've written down some of them, but I mean, I think the most important one is at the time when we wanted to convert AMD and you want to treat it to a level where you can drink it. I know there was an outcry from most people in the old, or let me put it, in the Rand Water service area.
Yeah.
It was said, no AMD in my tap water. Because we know that the Vaal River, and most people don't know it, but the water that we're drinking in the Gauteng is not from the barrage, so it's not that bad quality. It's from the Vaal Dam, although we know it's been polluted now. There's a lot of sewage pollution. But I mean, people said, why we've got such a good water, and I mean, Rand Water is doing an excellent job. Why? And that was their plea. Now, why do you want to bring in AMD, treated AMD? Because the idea was then to sort of to augment the Vaal River system with AMD. So that's one issue which I think must still be discussed. Probably, I don't know what's the discussions around that in terms of from the regulator, from the department side, but that's a very sensitive one. I honestly can't see why you can't drink AMD. I'll rather drink treated AMD because that's a chemical thing than drinking polluted or sewage water, treated sewage water. But I mean, we're doing it in any case because the water has been circulated, they say 3 or 4 times already through your toilets when you drink it in Gauteng. But it's good quality water. Rand Water has got excellent treatment systems. Okay, that was the one thing that you touched on. The other one is the use of water, and a couple of questions also rise from that is the communities around the mining companies. I know that I think it was Brugspruit was one of the treatment plants that the department built. And it was, when I last saw it, it was really it was dysfunctional, where you have communities downstream of that plant that are looking for water. They don't have drinking water. They drink water from the river. So I think this is where the department, and not only Water Affairs, but I mean the mining companies must take hands and deal with this issue. Because I mean, you can imagine, you're walking, and then the children were playing in the AMD there. And I mean, what's going to happen next? So that's something that I think the department, all the regulators, and the mining companies must join hands. So that was it. I've got a question which I want to pose to all the panelist members, but I mean, if you can give me a short answer on it. I mean, I'm going to ask the question because I think it's a very generic question. what factors are slowing the implementation of mine water treatment and the abatement strategy? And how can this be overcome? Because I hear also that, and I mean, I feel very sorry for the mining companies because, the mining companies, I mean, if you want a license, a water use license, I mean, it is not as if you go to a shop and you buy something. It is not that easy. And I mean, the longer we take, I mean, the more challenges we have. And I know that mining companies, they can change their strategy because of, many reasons. But I mean, now you have to do this, the next day you have to do that. And for everything, you need a license. And that takes time. So my question is, what factors do you think are slowing down? Is this one of it? And how can we overcome that? Kate, can we start with your very short answer, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, licensing is one. It's very real in the environmental space too, so we feel your pain. I think a lot of it is what Josh touched on. It's a complexity of making sure you spec the right solution for. There's no one size fits all, so it is quite bespoke and customized. It requires the right commercial model, so and a strategy about how you're going to treat that water and what you're going to use it for. It doesn't all have to be potable. Getting to potable is exceptionally expensive, but there is a large opportunity for instance, the water we're processing is clean water. It's not to potable standards. It's very clean. We reuse it on site. By reusing it on site, we're not putting any pressure on the fresh sources from municipalities. And that makes it, all from the boreholes, which makes a significant impact. So I think, yeah, the short answer, licensing, complexity, and then that collaboration of understanding what you're going to use it for. And there's a commercial reality and sustainability to that somewhere. It's not always that easy to get right. It sounds simple, but it is quite complex.
Thanks, Kate. Jennifer, your short answer, please. You are muted, Jennifer.
There we go. You've got to have that at least once in a Zoom. Yeah, so we have had a look at the legislation or regulations as one of the factors influencing implementation, and it's definitely in South Africa it's more of a barrier. So you would think that your legislation would, in principle, we have policies around cleaner production, circular economy, and all of this. But in actual, the reality of it, that the implementation of anything that is slightly innovative, the regulations are so onerous that they're actually a barrier. So our current regulatory environment is very prohibitive for the mining industry to do anything proactive, like generating, using mine water for irrigation even, or for potable water. It's very difficult for them to get licenses and to be proactive.
Thanks, Jennifer. Peter?
So for me, I think it's the brine and waste management that comes out of the back of the plants there. It's big, it'll keep on growing, and it's highly polluted. So really management of that is expensive and just takes a long time to get approved.
Thank you. Joshua?
Marius, I think I might be repeating myself. I think I've got full confidence in some of the technical capacity and the technical abilities we have in the country. The resources that is there to assist us technically. I'm confident of that. I think we've kept up with development, and we're applying the technologies that is realistic. I like what Kate says. There is a very real proper assessment in terms of long-term feasibilities. You have to look at the economic models. You cannot blindly just commit to processes that are not commercially viable. That is absolutely key. But I'll leave two things. For me, I think there's significant opportunity in terms of partnerships, and I'll leave that as wide as that. Across industries, inter-industry, with partnerships with government, solidifying the policies and the views in terms of how we regard this potential resource, converting the liability to a resource. I think that is the one thing. And then definitely an enabling regulatory framework. We need flexibility. We need clarity. You know, for us as mines, we need consistency. We need to be able to, you know, to work in a regulatory framework that we're 100% sure of. We cannot, you know, if and maybe, and then there's changes in policies and structures. We'd like to have that consistency. We don't mind regulations. We actually want strong regulations, but we want regulations that gives us the ability to plan long term, to execute in the short term, and that has some degree of flexibility and guidance as well as to, you know, where the country's policies are around mine water. I mean, you referred to earlier, we will never drink mine water. We need our partners in Department of Water and Sanitation, you know, also as an interface with the Rand Waters of the world, with our communities. If we don't collaborate and partner, we're not going to get the full value, and we'll be stuck with the liabilities indefinitely. Where I think really there's a great opportunity in a water space country to convert whatever the waters are that we challenge with into something that we can really unlock economic and social value for.
Thank you. Our time is up, but I just want to just say one or two things. You know, I think South Africa is currently the forerunner in, you know, in technology development and research and development, and specifically with mine water. You know, some time ago we were invited to the States to look at their treatment plants, AMD treatment plants, and we got there and we visited a plant, but it was fully fledged, and it was okay. It was a 5 megaliter per day plant. And I mean, they were like up in arms. This is a huge plant. Now, I know that 5 megaliters per day, you get these smaller mines in South Africa that can do much more than that. I mean, in the Witwatersrand, they're doing 250 megaliters per day. So that 5 megaliters per day plant, I mean, there was an engineer on site, there are scientists on site. That's a 5 megaliters per day plant. So I'm saying that South Africa is really doing very well in terms of our academic institutions. The research and development is good. However, I think what is necessary, and I want to close with that, is I think there needs to be much more collaboration. I think some of the speakers mentioned that, Joshua mentioned it also. Collaboration between the researchers and, you know, the people that have to develop and implement it on the other side. So that I still see there's a lack, because the mining companies, they're doing their things. Some of them are talking to each other, and then the universities on the other side, it's an academic exercise, which we want to become much more practical, so that people can use it on the site. So yeah, that is a plea for everybody. I don't know where we're going to take this to, but we need to get together so that, you know, if you do research on one thing, you know, you don't want your neighbor to do exactly the same thing. We can learn from each other. And in terms of that, you know, we can save a lot of money and time. But thank you very much, panelists. I think it was a good discussion. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So with this, no further ado, I want to hand over to Shannon. Shannon, thank you very much from our side.
Thanks very much, Marius. I saw just as you were saying your goodbyes that Joshua had something extra to say. So Joshua, I'll hand over to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Maybe just one thing to add. What is promising, and we always see things. We tend to see regulatory changes and things that, you know, sometimes in a negative light. But what I've seen happening in the wastewater space currently, you know, unlocking the opportunity for private entities and large organizations. It's not just mining, you know, for other people to also get involved, you know, in the water treatment space. Maybe there is a shift, you know, in the country where, if regulations opens it up for more people to be involved and actively involved in, for example, treating water, being able to sell water. I mean, you know, the challenges and some of the conversations we've had before, you know, around just the notion of thinking that, you know, water can be dealt with by a private entity or maybe a private public partnership or some other structure. That is encouraging. It's encouraging to see that landscape change as well. And maybe we must utilize those opportunities as well. You know, just not to just only end on a negative note as far as regulations are concerned. There are some positives coming out of you know, the whole policy conversation and where things are going. And I think we must harness that energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. I think since you've given us a few wrap-up words, I think I'd like to also extend that to the other panelists as well. So perhaps, Kate, is there anything that you would like to close out with before I say our goodbyes?
No, but thank you. Well, I think, yeah, there are lots of challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities. And, we've got to balance it. But there's actually some incredible work being done. And so let's keep focused on that, on the problems to solve.
Thank you very much, Kate. And Jennifer, let's move over to you. You can give your final words.
Okay, I think yes, something just linking into what Joshua said about technology. I think technology is essential but not sufficient, and it's not the main barrier. So we have the technologies, it's just trying to find technology that is fit for purpose, taking into account all the other factors, the socio-political, the social-cultural, the economic, the environmental
Sorry,
factors.
Jennifer, we seem to have lost your audio there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you're back.
I'm back. All right. So yeah, just taking into account, all the other factors, the geography, the social, cultural, the environmental, and the economic, to develop these fit for purpose solutions. And I very strongly believe that we've got to move from end of pipe and converting then acid mine drainage into brines and gypsum and all these other wastes. And move towards preventing acid mine draining, preventing losses of water. This is where we should be really aiming our solutions.
Thanks, Jennifer, for those closing remarks. And then finally, moving on to you, Peter, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I think the amount of progress that the mining fraternity has done in the last 30 years needs to continue. If we can do this similar kind of interventions and developments in the last 30 years, if we can do that for the next 30 years there, I think it's going to be a very different landscape to what we've got now.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists, and also most importantly, thank you to Marius Kiert for facilitating this discussion. Our panelists included Kate Stubbs from Interwaste, Jennifer Broadhurst from University of Cape Town, Peter Shepherd from SRK Consulting, and Joshua Ellis from Harmony Gold Mining Company. Thank you to our sponsors, Interwaste and IPR, for their support in making this webinar possible. With a long record of service delivery and technological excellence, Interwaste prides itself in being the leading waste management company operating in Southern Africa. Equipped with passion and driven by the determination to realize its vision of leading in the sustainable preservation of the environment, Interwaste consistently innovates and creates viable solutions for a range of waste challenges. Find out more by visiting their website at www.interwaste.co.za. Finally, thank you to the attendees for taking the time to join us for this discussion on the technologies to address mine water challenges. We hope you found this event engaging and informative. We appreciate your participation. The next webinar takes place on 26 June at 2 p.m. and will focus on ESG in mining, where a panel will discuss the initiatives to promote ESG and sustainability in mining. The link to register for that event has been shared in the chat. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course, and if you have any additional questions, please be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. Thank you everyone for your time, and goodbye.